Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello everyone, we are back to horse racing today on The Paddock and the Pavilion. On Tuesday the 23rd of June 2020, the career of young jockey Jacob Pritchard Webb changed forever after a fall riding in France left him paralysed from the waist down. All of our lives can change in a moment, as Jacob has discovered. And making this podcast has made me think how our own lives can change in a split second. Thank you for coming on the show, Jacob. How are you today?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Stephen?
I'm very good, thank you. And your story, as we were talking off air, does make you think, and it certainly made me think just even preparing and reading about you on the podcast and having seen you on the Sky Sports documentary with Luke Harvey only a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it was a bit of a, obviously, I suppose it happening out in France kind of got a bit more publicity. I don't really know if there had been many serious accidents out there to the degree of mine. And it kind of went under the radar for the first 3 weeks. There was no news. And then the Racing Post article came out, and then it just went crazy after that. And then since then, people have followed it up, and then almost a year to the day almost that me and Luke did the Sky Sports interview, and again that went quite crazy after that as well. So it's been a bit of a wild ride to say the least this last year.
Well, if we can take you back to that day on the 23rd of June, was it just a normal day's racing for you on that day?
No, it was actually kind of hectic. So I had 2 rides at Auteuil, which is the premier track in France. It's the equivalent to Cheltenham. And I was having only my 4th and 5th ride at the track, both outside rides for 2 Western trainers, one who I ride for regularly anyway, and one was for Serge Fouché, the trainer of Sire de Grugy and Courto Star. And they both had good each-way chances. I hadn't ridden either of them before. And the night before, I drove up to Chantilly, which was 4 hours from my base with Emmanuel Clay in the centre of France. And I met some friends and had some lunch. And then the following morning, I'd never ridden out in Chantilly before. So I went and rode one lot out for David Cotin on the famous Les Aigles gallops, which is the 4-kilometre gallop through the woods, the famous ones that you see in the pictures that's got the steady incline. So, however, that then left me running late for the races, and with Paris traffic next to the Stade de France, I remember vividly passing that and thinking, I'm gonna miss my first ride, and you almost laugh about it now. It's like then it was almost the worst thing in the world if I'd have missed that ride. And now looking back, it's like, damn, maybe I should have missed that ride. So got there. It was a very hot day. I remember it was an extremely hot day, and I was riding for the owners now become a good friend of mine, actually, because of the accent, a vet, and he has pure black silks. And I remember all the lads laughing at me wearing black silks. And the horse was also quite keen. And it was a good race, so we went off fast. We were looking at about a horse rated about 135 ability. And we got to the 4th, and I couldn't really tell you what happened in terms of how we even made the mistake to fall. It was the obstacle was an oxer. It's a very long and low, but very solid obstacle in French racing. And it was as he landed his following stride, he's almost like he couldn't get his front legs out in front of him. So he just fell into and it's not a jump where you would typically ever slip your reins like in English racing, because you're never landing that steep. And so I've obviously got a tight hold of his head, and as he's gone down, it's fired me into the ground head first, and then which resulted in all the damage.
So what was it?
Yeah, I remember.
Was it pain instantly then when you went down?
I think I get asked a lot, did I get knocked out? It's almost like this thought process that a heavy fall or a lot of pain makes you pass out. I think I hit my head and momentarily was blacked out, but as soon as I hit my back, the pain brought me back out of unconsciousness. That's how it must have been. I can't tell you that for sure, but all I do remember is after I stopped rolling, I am conscious, and yeah, I can feel everything in terms of the pain. But as I was rolling, I lost the feeling to my legs, and I'm lying there. Well, it was live on telly. I'm lying there, starfish across the ground, but there's a phantom feeling that my legs are still in the air because I lost the sensation during mid-roll. It was just very, very bizarre, very bizarre. And I just remember this excruciating pain going through my T4, which was the major vertebrae that got broken. In a funny way, I couldn't feel my broken ribs so I was almost blessed from that point of view. So it was a bit of a...
So were your parents watching on television at the time? Or?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were watching live. And my dad was just stunned, and my mum couldn't understand, because it's so weird. I had only about 100 rides, and I'd fallen off plenty of times before, but I'd never broken anything. I'm not one of, I'd never done a collarbone, and never done, nothing. And then in that one fall, and my strike rate of falls in France had gone, I only had 3 falls from 60 rides, which was just unheard of. And in that one fall, I managed to do all that damage, and they just couldn't. It was like, oh God, he's not moving and he's not got up. And it was like, but like I said, I couldn't even tell you how the horse made the fall, and it happened so quickly. They couldn't fathom it either. So my mum kept recording it, and my dad was just like, why are we still watching this? And then they didn't hear anything for about 20 minutes, I believe. Felix de Giles got my phone to me in the ambulance, but I didn't see him. And then the woman said, oh, your phone's ringing, it's your mum, do you want to answer it? And I said, yeah, we better had. And then the 2 questions were have you broken your back? And I said, yes, I think so. And it's, can you feel your legs? And I said, no. And then my mum said, right, we're on our way. And 9.5 hours later, they arrived in Paris. So yeah, quite extraordinary, really.
Yeah, and I read in one of your articles that you said that 1 in 16 jockeys, 1 in 16 races you fall. So you had quite a good record of not falling, and you really are a different breed, you National Hunt jockeys.
Yeah, I don't know what the result. I mean, I could look through, but I think I had 40 rides in pointing, and I probably hit the deck 10 or 12 times. And then I had 60 rides in France. I got unseated once, and that was in a French cross country, which are pretty fearsome. And it was down in Po, which some of the obstacles down there are ginormous. And then I had 2 falls from 60 rides. So it was a different way of riding, though, a bit more conservative midway through the race, and the horses tend to finish with a bit more energy. So I suppose they're not running on tired legs as much as they would be over here. So yeah, it was just Couldn't really believe it, really.
Well, let's go back to your beginnings in horse racing. We're going to talk later about your recovery and your, I think, nearly 6 months you spent in hospital. I read you started in harness racing. Why did you start in harness racing?
Well, because of the man who you just briefly met. My grandparents, this was back in the day when there still used to be flapping in Wales, along with harness racing. And Grandad started off with a flapper, and then they got a mare, a pacer, and it all started off from there, really. And then they got another one with some family members, and we're talking now probably 40, 45 years ago this started. And so my nan raced, and then my mum's oldest sister raced, my mum raced, my auntie's husband raced. It was just throughout the family, really. So I didn't start riding till the age of 11, and then I did my first harness race at the age of 14. When I look back now, I went and watched harness racing for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I just thought, I'm quite glad I'm not doing that anymore, because it looked bonkers. But at the age of 14, I suppose I was quite fearless. And I managed to win my first race as well. And I had a lot of success, actually. Did it for 5 years. Had something like 43 winners. But my granddad was champion driver 12 times. So we were kind of like one of the powerhouse stables in the harness racing world. So I was very lucky. I had a lot of good horses. And somebody said, "Oh, you're small and light." And you can also do it in a saddle, not just the sulky. So I was winning quite a lot of those races, and they were like, "Why don't you go be a jockey?" And it was a summer sport. So in the winter, your weekends were spent watching national hunt racing. And it was like, yeah, okay then. So I went to the racing school at 18 and went straight into Sir Mark's.
So you went to the racing school at Newmarket, and then you went to Sir Mark's at Heath House.
Yes, yeah. They said that Sir Mark was looking for someone. And I think actually I was one of the oldest people on the course. I only did the 4-week course. I've been riding out at yards during my time at Hartbury, part-time and stuff. And Sir Mark was looking for a lad. And they said they thought I would fit the bill. So, yeah, I went there and was there for 13 months. And it was brilliant. Some of the best, brilliant grounding, best place to learn everything from such an early age in the world of horse racing. And I mean, there's no better man to work for, really. He's a bit of a legend and quite frightening at times. And it was hard work, that's for sure. But I was there when we had Marsha and Time Warp, and so yeah, it was a good time to be there.
So did you get to ride Marsha as well?
I did, yes.
Oh wow!
Yes, got to do at the start of her. It was at the end of beginning of her 3-year-old season, I believe. All I remember, I think I rode her for about 6 weeks, but it was when she'd come back into work, and I did her first couple of pieces of work on the Alba Hat Tree, but it was all with the handbrake on. And I remember it was the final piece of work I did before Luke Morris took over, and I hadn't worked any horse up to the caliber that she was. And I remember Sir Mark saying, "Right, you're going to join Time Warp on the inside," who was obviously no mug at this stage, listed horse. Join Time Warp up the inside. Do not move on her, and do not pass him. And I was like kind of worried, thinking, how am I going to get this horse without asking her to join? Bearing in mind, like, I'd been riding horses that were probably half the rating that she was. And Sir Mark's rule is that if you don't have a license, a jockey's license, you can't ride with the whip. So everything is hands and heels. And when you're inexperienced, that's quite difficult. And anyway, I'll never forget the feeling all of the moment, because the gap opened up and my hands just got further and further away from her neck, and she just got stronger and stronger. Luckily, it didn't go wrong, but oh wow, yeah, what a horse! No, she was. I'm very proud to have been a part of a small part of the horse that she became, because she was a bit of a superstar. So
no, she certainly was. A great learning place at St Mark's to start your racing career. And you then went to, is it Fergal O'Brien's as well?
Yeah, I was in at Fergal's for 2 years. That's basically, big credit to Sally Randall, really, for getting me schooling, because I'd done no jumping. It's not like I did pony club or anything like that. The trotters were all galloped on the flat and stuff. So there'd be no schooling. So it was a bit of a, right, I need to learn everything, because my weight was too heavy for the flat. And Sally, they took me on, and Sally got me schooling, and it was a slow slog at it, and lots of frustrating days trying to get the timings right and see strides and everything. And from my time of being there, June Watts, who was one of Sally's owners, and a lovely, lovely woman, they had a horse called Pantzoa that was previously with Alan King, and then went to Fergal to be a hunter chaser, and won first time out with Ali Sterling, being a good horse of John Joe's. And he had 3 runs for Fergal, and then they offered him to me to be a pointer, so that I trained him myself in my lunch times. And he was stabled down the road with a couple who I ended up living with and becoming very close with, Matthew and Linda Delahook. And yeah, from being at Fergal's and having him, they kind of taught me everything. And he was great, because he wasn't a schoolmaster, and he was as safe as houses, but he wasn't like your typical schoolmaster, because he wasn't an easy ride, and he wasn't, foot perfect at every jump, shall we say. So I had plenty of mishaps on him, and he's actually just arrived at the farm this week for his retirement, after two years of training him, and in 2 years of being apart from him, being out in France and stuff. I've now got him at the farm now to be retired for at the age of 14. So it's kind of a lovely story, really.
It sounds it, yeah. And how then from Fergal O'Brien's did you get to be riding in? You must have ridden some races in this country, as you saying, point to pointing that. How did you then get to finish up riding in France?
I did a summer and a winter at Fergal's, or just a bit more. And then it got to the summer, and I said to Fergal, I need to get more experience schooling in order for to be an asset to you. And I said, can I have 8 weeks out in France? A woman who I rode out for pointing had met a head girl out there who was selling horses at a sale, and for a French trainer. And they always looked for staff. They'd also previously had Rex Dingle out there at this yard. So I got in contact with her. Fergal was like, yeah, you can have, a month, or if you like it, do 2 months out there. And this was with Alain Catil in the west of France, at Sanon, where Louisa Carberry also trains. So I drove out there with my mum, and then she flew back the following day. And then I spent 8 weeks one summer with Alain Catil's, and he'd have 70, 80 horses, and about 15 of those would be jumpers. And then I'd say about 30 of the horses would be AQPS flat horses that would then possibly jump with him, or if they'd done well, he'd sell them. And it was brilliant. It was a roasting hot summer. It was a great lifestyle. You don't just work all the time. There's plenty of living to be done out there. And I loved it. There was a small English community as well, which is nice because you don't feel completely alone, but the French were very welcoming, and you were just and I was learning about the way their racing works, and I was just seeing so many positives. And it was the fact that people were like, oh, if you had a different license, you'd have been riding this weekend. And I'd only been there a month, and I was like, maybe I'm missing the boat here. However, I'd only just done one season with my pointer, and I thought it was too much of a risk to stay out there, because it was like people would use me, but I hadn't had enough experience under my belt to probably kind of sell myself. So I came back to England, did another season pointing. After a couple of months, I left Fergal's and went to Emma Bishop's because I just wanted to ride out in the mornings and then try and spend my afternoons at pointing yards to get as many opportunities on the weekend. Because when I came back from France, within about 2 months, I decided that I was going to go back the following year and I was going to stay out there. I'd obviously in that time learned about the exploits of James Reevely and Felix de Giles and how well they had done out there,
weren't they?
Yeah. And James will be champion again this year. Felix this year has also just won the French Grand National. It's just like, huge races. And I was just like, and so I did another season. I only had 2 winners that year. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely the right decision to go. And Emma had been great to me for the 6 months previously. I learned a bit more. We broke a horse in together, which was another string to my bow. Did it all by myself. And 3 winners I think I'd had in the 2 years pointing, which isn't really enough to get you collected by a big for a big conditional job in England. So I made the move, went back to Alan Catil's for 2 months, had a couple of rides on my English license for a small trainer in Sanon, and I ended up with 2 seconds in my first 4 rides. I was thinking, this is easy. I couldn't believe my luck. And then I got the job with Emmanuel. I'd met Felix, and him and Louisa said, go down to Emmanuel's. If you're not going to, because there was obviously going to be the competition element at a big yard again. And I kind of was thinking, well, it didn't work the last time at Fergal's, so I was a bit apprehensive. But it was a case of, he's a good man, a good trainer, with people like Felix going in, and there was Gareth Malone there at the time, who was also an ex-English jockey. If you don't like it after 6 months, you will learn something from there. Your riding will get 10 times better.
What about language? I mean, how was your French? Had you learnt much, or were you good at school at French?
No, I went over with zero French.
Big challenge.
Yeah, but riding out at Alan's, you had the head girl with English, and the staff were all very welcoming, and they found it enjoyable to learn English, and they would teach you French as you were riding out, and then you go out for nights out with them. The only trainer I ever rode for who spoke English was Emmanuel. So I learned horse French, which is basically, do you want me in front or behind? And can he jump? And I remember my first winner for Bertrand. He pointed to that fence, and I understood last lap. He pointed to that fence and he said, when you jump that, and then he just went push. So it was very easy instructions. And
looking at your record in France, you had 6 winners, 11 places in about 60 rides. So
yes, something like that. Yeah, and most of my rides I was normally always in the top 5 as well, because obviously prize money is down to that. So I kept a lot of people happy picking up checks.
So were you happy with where your career was going before the accident? Because I'm going to come on to the recovery in your hospital next.
Yeah. Looking back, absolutely. At the time, the month before my accident was hard going.
It's a lot of travelling, isn't there?
Yeah, I'd had a winner in the May, and I'd driven 500 kilometers one way for one ride. Luckily, it went and won, and it was about a $9,000 to the winner race. So it was a decent race in Chateaubriand, but it was still over 1,000 kilometers in a day. And I was dreading it not winning, just from a mental standpoint. And then the next month was hard graft. And then the weekend before the accident, I finally got a second and a third. So I was kind of a bit happier. But yeah, it was a lot of driving. And because I'd started in the West, I had a lot of contacts, and Bertrand Lefebvre was in the West. So I was constantly trying to figure out whether I was going to be riding for Emmanuel in Paris or in the middle of France, or I'd be up in the West riding for Bertrand. But I'd run, from the 6 winners, one was a flat winner, one was a hurdle winner, and the rest were all over fences. And then I suppose you could kind of say it had to have been going somewhere in order to have 2 rides at Auteuil for outside trainers. So yeah, I was very proud of that.
Catch part 2 with Jacob, available from Sunday the 4th of September. In the podcast, I spoke to this determined young man about his lengthy spell in a French hospital, along with his future ambitions. Here's a clip from part 2.
The first week, I can't really remember too much, to be honest. My mum, like I said, my mum and dad came that night, and my mum stayed with me for every day, bar, I think 3 or 4 days she wasn't with me. I remember seeing Felix on the following day after my accident, and us having a laugh about something. So I had a very good support group. My nan came over 3 days later and spent the weekend. So I was never actually alone. And that was a huge thing. Even though it was COVID, it was at a time in France where the COVID was never bad enough to not allow visitors. We were limited on how many people, but that was basically what got me through, was the visitors.
Thank you for listening to The Paddock and the Pavilion. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and now on Instagram at The Pad and Pav. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
At Bridgewater College, we believe that the greatest possibilities in life are realized in what we build together. So we've designed the Bridgewater Experience as a network of connections to big ideas, great mentors, inspiring classmates, and professional experiences. Your team will learn and grow in ways you never thought possible. Schedule a tour or find an upcoming campus event at bridgewater.edu/connect. So together, we can begin to build connections for life. Again, that's bridgewater.edu/connect.